June 19, 1967, Bassac River, Vietnam. Lieutenant James Holland felt the vibration of the diesels before he heard their roar. His PBR-52 cut through the pre-dawn haze at 30 knots, slicing the murky waters of a narrow channel somewhere between Can Tho and the Cambodian border. Two crew members at the bow peered into the darkness through the sights of twin 50 caliber machine guns, their fingers resting on the triggers. Astern, the Mk-19 grenade launcher was trained on the mangrove thickets from which fire could erupt at any second. Holland knew the numbers by heart. Over the past 3 weeks, the Vietcong had lost control of 17 key river crossings in this sector. Soviet RPG-2s, Chinese Type 56 assault rifles, improvised mines, the entire arsenal that had made these waters deadly just a month earlier, now proved powerless against the aluminum armor and concentrated firepower of American river patrols. What had been the domain of local guerrillas for centuries, the labyrinth of streams, canals, and river channels of the Mekong Delta, was being transformed into a zone of American supremacy. But this morning the radio message warned, ahead, near the village of Kai Bi, an ambush. Large, with heavy weapons. And Holland was steering his boat straight into its epicenter, because the mathematics of this war had changed. Armored hulls had replaced partisan wooden sampans, automatic cannons and grenade launchers instead of rifles. And most importantly, behind every American sailor stood a logistical empire capable of delivering reinforcements, ammunition, and airstrikes within minutes. The River War was just beginning. The survival of Lieutenant Holland and his crew that morning depended not merely on courage or tactical skill, but on a mathematical reality inaccessible to their enemy. A revolution in riverine warfare that transformed Vietnam's most treacherous waterways from Vietcong sanctuaries into American-controlled highways. The Mekong Delta, a sprawling maze of 2,500 miles of navigable rivers and 2,500 miles of smaller canals, had been communist territory since the First Indochina War. By 1967, U.S. Navy forces, supported by technological and logistical capabilities unprecedented in Riverine combat history, were systematically reversing that reality. This transformation rested on 3 foundations: specialized riverine craft that could outgun and outmaneuver any vessel the enemy fielded, a logistics network sustaining high-intensity operations in one of Earth's most hostile environments, and the integration of naval, air, and ground forces into a unified system of dominance. Behind this capability stood an adversary few Americans saw: the Soviet Union, which supplied the Vietcong and North Vietnamese Army with weapons, training, and equipment specifically designed to contest American river control. What emerged was not simply guerrilla war in shallow waters, but proxy confrontation between superpower military doctrines, fought by sailors in aluminum boats amid the blood-warm currents of the Delta. The numbers revealed the story. By end of 1967, U.S. riverine forces conducted an average of 200 patrol operations monthly. Enemy infiltration routes that had moved thousands of tons of supplies were being severed. Kill ratios in river engagements averaged 15-1-1, favoring American forces. The Vietcong, which had controlled Delta waterways since the late 1950s, was being systematically driven from the rivers. This was riverine supremacy written in steel, firepower, and the blood of sailors who turned Vietnam's rivers into battlegrounds where American technology and determination prevailed against a cunning foe backed by Moscow's arsenals. The patrol boat, River, universally known as the PBR, became the iconic symbol of American riverine warfare, developed rapidly in 1965 and deployed to Vietnam in early 1966. The PBR represented radical departure from traditional naval craft. Its designers at Uniflight created a vessel that was part speedboat, part gunship, entirely lethal. The PBR measured 31 feet in length with a 10.5-foot beam. Its hull was fiberglass reinforced plastic over aluminum frames, making it lightweight yet durable. But the true innovation lay in propulsion. Instead of conventional propellers vulnerable to fouling in weed-choked waters, the PBR utilized water jet drives that sucked water through intake ports and expelled it through directional nozzles. This allowed operation in water as shallow as 2 feet and speeds exceeding 25 knots while retaining extraordinary maneuverability. A PBR could execute a 180-degree turn within its own length, capability that proved life-saving in narrow channels when ambushed. Armament transformed the PBR from patrol craft into mobile weapons platform. Twin 50-caliber M2 Browning machine guns mounted in a forward gun tub could pour 200 rounds per minute into enemy positions. On the stern, a single 50-caliber provided rear security. Many PBRs added a MK-19 automatic grenade launcher amidships, firing 40mm grenades at 60 rounds per minute to 500-meter ranges. When a PBR engaged, it delivered fire volume that no sampan, no riverside bunker, no guerrilla ambush could withstand. The crew numbered 4. A boat captain, typically a petty officer or junior lieutenant, an engineman managing twin diesel engines producing 430 combined horsepower, and 2 gunners manning weapons and maintaining constant vigilance. These men, many barely out of their teens, operated in constant danger. River patrols lasted 8 to 12 hours, often in darkness, always alert for ambush signs, a suspicious fishing net, an absent village, the glint of metal in tree line. By mid-1967, over 120 PBRs operated in the Delta under Task Force 116, codenamed Operation Game Warden. Their mission was straightforward: interdict enemy supply lines, prevent infiltration from Cambodia, inspect civilian river traffic, and destroy Vietcong forces wherever encountered. The operational tempo was punishing. PBR crews conducted an average of 200 patrols monthly, covering thousands of waterway miles. They stopped and searched an average of 150,000 sampans and junks monthly, arresting Vietcong suspects, confiscating weapons, and disrupting supply networks that had operated uncontested for years. The impact was immediate and measurable. Intelligence reports from mid-1967 indicated Vietcong supply movements by river had been reduced by an estimated 60% in areas where PBRs operated regularly. Communist documents captured later revealed frustration of Vietcong commanders who found traditional infiltration routes suddenly deadly. Intercepted report from a Vietcong logistics officer in August 1967 stated that moving supplies by river had become prohibitively dangerous, and that losses to American patrol boats had forced shifts to overland routes, slower, more vulnerable to aerial interdiction, far less efficient. But PBRs paid a price for their aggressiveness. The Vietcong adapted, laying command-detonated mines along known patrol routes, positioning recoilless rifles and heavy machine guns in fortified bunkers on riverbanks, and occasionally massing forces for large-scale ambushes. Soviet-supplied weapons proliferated. The RPG-2 rocket-propelled grenade, capable of penetrating armor, became increasingly common. Chinese-made 12.7mm heavy machine guns, equivalent to American .50 caliber, provided firepower sufficient to damage PBRs at range. American sailors responded with tactical innovations. PBRs began operating in pairs, with one boat providing suppressive fire while the other maneuvered. They coordinated with helicopter gunships, calling in air support within minutes of contact. They learned to read the river, recognizing ambush sites, avoiding predictable patrol patterns, striking at unexpected times and places. Aggressive patrolling, combined with firepower and mobility, gradually shifted the balance. By late 1967, the PBR had become the dominant predator on Delta waterways, and the Vietcong knew it. While PBRs patrolled main rivers and canals, a different vessel was deployed for a different warfare. The monitors, heavily armored, slow-moving, bristling with weapons, were designed not for speed, but for raw combat power. These were gunships of the Riverine War, capable of going bow to bow with fortified enemy positions and emerging victorious. The monitors were conversions of World War II-era LCM-6 landing craft, 56 feet long with welded steel hulls transformed into mobile fortresses. Armor was the monitor's defining characteristic. Steel plates up to 2 inches thick protected hull and superstructure. The pilot house was encased in armor with narrow vision slits, turning it into a bunker from which the boat's commander directed fire. This armor could withstand 50 caliber rounds, AK-47 fire, and even light recoilless rifle hits at range. The weight meant monitors were slow, rarely exceeding 8 knots. But in confined delta waters, speed was less important than survivability and firepower. And firepower monitors possessed in abundance. Standard armament included a 40mm cannon in forward turret, 2 20mm cannons positioned amidships, and multiple bullets of 50 caliber machine guns, covering all fire arcs. Some monitors, designated Zippos, mounted flamethrowers capable of projecting burning napalm 150 yards, incinerating bunkers and vegetation with terrifying efficiency. Others carried 81mm mortars for indirect fire support. When a monitor opened fire, it delivered an ordnance storm that could suppress enemy positions, destroy buildings, and provide cover for troops landing from accompanying carriers. The monitors were centerpiece of the mobile Riverine force, a joint Army-Navy command established in early 1967 that represented the fullest expression of Riverine warfare doctrine. The concept was revolutionary. An entire infantry brigade, the 2nd Brigade of 9th Infantry Division, would be based afloat on barracks ships anchored in rivers. When intelligence identified an enemy concentration, the brigade would embark on armored troop carriers, ATCs, converted from the same LCM-6 landing craft, escorted by monitors and assault support patrol boats. This flotilla would move rapidly to the objective area, often at night, and launch coordinated assaults at dawn. The mobile Riverine force conducted its first major operation, codenamed Coronado Wars, in June 1967. Over following months, the pattern repeated. Intelligence indicated Vietcong presence in a particular village or area. The force mobilized and moved into position under darkness. At first light, monitors and gunships saturated the landing zone with suppressive fire, while ATCs disgorged infantry. Soldiers swept through the area while boats remained on station to provide fire support and casualty evacuation. Then the entire force re-embarked and moved to the next objective. The operational tempo was relentless. Between June and December 1967, the mobile Riverine force conducted 41 major operations, killed an estimated 200 Vietcong fighters, and captured significant weapons caches. The force's mobility meant the Vietcong could no longer establish permanent base areas in the Central Delta. Any concentration of enemy forces risked drawing rapid response from a brigade that could appear anywhere within its operational area within hours. Soviet military advisors observing the war noted mobile Riverine force effectiveness with concern. Captured documents revealed North Vietnamese and Soviet analysts studied American Riverine tactics carefully, seeking vulnerabilities. They recommended intensified mining efforts, heavier anti-boat weapons, and more sophisticated ambush techniques. The USSR increased shipments of anti-tank weapons, knowing these could be effective against monitors' armor. But the fundamental problem remained. The Americans possessed not just superior vessels, but a system of integrated operations combining mobility, firepower, and logistics in ways the Vietcong could not match. One engagement illustrated this dominance. On September 15, 1967, near the village of Cam Son, a mobile Riverine force convoy came under heavy attack from an estimated battalion-sized Vietcong force entrenched in fortified positions along both riverbanks. The Vietcong had carefully prepared the ambush site, positioning recoilless rifles, heavy machine guns, and RPG teams in bunkers with interlocking fields of fire. As first ATCs entered the kill zone, a storm of fire erupted. But monitors responded immediately. Their 40mm and 20mm cannons raked the bunker line, while 50 calibers suppressed individual firing positions. A Zippo moved forward and incinerated an entire section of enemy fortifications. Within 8 minutes, helicopter gunships arrived overhead, called in by the flotilla commander. The Vietcong fought back fiercely, scoring hits on several boats and inflicting casualties. But the outcome was never in doubt. The monitors absorbed enemy fire, their armor holding against everything short of direct recoilless rifle hits. The ATCs completed landings and disgorged infantry who assaulted weakened positions from the flank. By mid-afternoon, the battle was over. American forces counted 43 enemy dead confirmed, numerous blood trails indicating more casualties dragged away, and captured 6 crew-served weapons, including a 12.7mm heavy machine gun of Soviet manufacture. American casualties numbered 3 killed and 14 wounded, all evacuated by helicopter to field hospitals within 30 minutes. The technological superiority of PBRs and monitors would have meant nothing without the massive logistical apparatus keeping them operational. Riverine warfare in the Mekong Delta consumed resources at staggering rates. Diesel fuel, ammunition, food, potable water, spare parts, medical supplies, everything needed to sustain operations in one of Earth's most hostile environments had to be transported thousands of miles from the United States, then distributed throughout the Delta to dozens of bases, floating barracks ships, and forward operating positions. Each PBR burned approximately 50 gallons of diesel fuel per hour at cruising speed. With over 120 PBRs conducting continuous operations, daily fuel consumption exceeded 150,000 gallons for patrol boats alone. The monitors and other mobile Riverine force vessels consumed fuel at similar or greater rates. Ammunition expenditure was equally prodigious. A single engagement might see a PBR fire 2,000 rounds of 50 caliber ammunition and hundreds of 40mm grenades. The monitors, with multiple weapon systems, could expend tens of thousands of rounds in major battles. All this material flowed through a supply pipeline stretching across the Pacific Ocean. Cargo ships departed regularly from West Coast ports loaded with everything from diesel fuel and ammunition to spare water jet impellers and flamethrower napalm canisters. These ships docked at Saigon's Newport complex, where Navy logistics specialists sorted and redirected supplies to forward bases throughout the Delta. From there, supply vessels, often modified LSTs or smaller craft, distributed material to mobile bases and barracks ships. The barracks ships themselves represented logistical innovation. These were converted LSTs fitted with berthing facilities, mess halls, medical facilities, and maintenance shops. They served as floating bases from which the mobile Riverine force operated, allowing the brigade to position itself anywhere in the Delta without depending on fixed land bases. The APL-30 Benoa and APL-26 Colleton, 2 primary barracks ships, each housed over 1,000 soldiers and sailors and maintained facilities equivalent to a small town. Generators, freshwater distillation plants, repair shops, armories. Maintaining the boats demanded extraordinary effort. The delta's waters were corrosive, filled with sediment, and home to vegetation that fouled intakes and pumps. The fiberglass hulls of PBRs, while light and fast, required constant inspection and repair. Combat damage, bullet holes, shrapnel gouges, blast damage, was routine. Each base maintained repair facilities where boats rotated for maintenance. During 1967 alone, American forces in the Delta expended over 45 million gallons of diesel fuel. Ammunition expenditure exceeded 30,000 tons. Spare parts requests averaged 5,000 line items monthly. Food supplies sufficient for 15,000 personnel operating afloat or at remote bases required constant replenishment. Medical supplies, including whole blood flown in from Japan, sustained the casualty evacuation system that saved countless lives. The Vietcong and their North Vietnamese allies, by contrast, operated on a logistical shoestring. Their river forces consisted of sampans and small junks, powered by sail or weak outboard motors, carrying AK-47s and RPGs. They had no repair facilities beyond village workshops, no fuel supply beyond what could be siphoned from civilian stocks or smuggled from Cambodia, and no ammunition resupply beyond what infiltrated down the Ho Chi Minh Trail or arrived by sea from the USSR and China. Soviet advisors in North Vietnam recognized this disparity and attempted to address it. The USSR provided small arms, crew-served weapons, and anti-tank systems in large quantities. They shipped thousands of tons of ammunition and supplied fuel for North Vietnamese operations. But the Soviets could not replicate the American logistical system. They lacked the global network of bases, the massive merchant marine, and the industrial capacity to sustain forces operating at the intensity Americans maintained. This created a vicious cycle for the enemy. American interdiction reduced supply flows, which limited Vietcong combat capability, which allowed Americans to expand control over additional waterways, which further reduced enemy supply capacity. By late 1967, intelligence estimates suggested Vietcong forces in the Delta were receiving less than 40% of supplies they required to sustain operations at pre-1966 levels. Technology and logistics created the potential for dominance, but it was the sailors and soldiers who made it real. The men who crewed the PBRs, monitors, and other riverine craft were overwhelmingly young. Average age was 21 and came from every corner of America. Many had volunteered for riverine duty, attracted by the promise of action. Others had been assigned based on Navy personnel needs. All found themselves in a war unlike anything their training had fully prepared them for. The nature of riverine combat fostered unique stress. Unlike infantry who could dig in or seek cover, boat crews were exposed, their vessels obvious targets moving through narrow channels where ambushes could erupt from either bank. Engagements happened at point-blank range, often less than 50 yards, where every burst of enemy fire rattled against the hull or whined overhead. The knowledge that a single RPG could cripple or sink the boat, that mines could explode beneath them at any moment, that help might be minutes away, created constant background tension that never fully dissipated. Yet these men performed with extraordinary courage and professionalism. Casualty rates among riverine forces, while lower than infantry, were significant. Approximately 8% killed or wounded annually. But operational tempo never slackened. Crews that had been ambushed one day returned to patrol the same waters the next. Individual acts of heroism became routine. On August 24, 1967, Petty Officer Second Class James Williams commanded a PBR on patrol near the Cambodian border when his boat and another PBR encountered a force of approximately 60 Vietcong fighters crossing the river in sampans. Williams immediately attacked, his boat's weapons firing into enemy craft at close range. In the confused melee that followed, with darkness falling and the Vietcong returning fire from both water and riverbanks, Williams maneuvered his damaged PBR to shield the other boat while maintaining continuous fire. He personally manned the Mk-19 grenade launcher after his gunner was wounded, firing until ammunition was exhausted, then directed his .50 caliber gunners while simultaneously calling for helicopter support and organizing casualty evacuation. When the engagement ended, over 40 enemy dead floated in the river or lay on the banks. Williams's boat had taken 16 hits, but his crew survived. For his actions, Williams received the Navy Cross. The Monitor's crews faced different challenges. Their boats were slower, making them more vulnerable to sustained fire. But their armor and firepower gave them defensive capability PBR crews lacked. Monitor crews learned to absorb hits that would have destroyed lighter craft, maintaining fire even as rounds clanged off armor around them. In dozens of engagements throughout 1967, monitors closed to within yards of fortified enemy positions, trading fire until superior American firepower silenced the bunkers. Medical personnel, both Navy corpsmen on boats and Army medics with infantry, performed miracles under impossible conditions. When casualties occurred during river operations, treatment began immediately on cramped decks of PBRs or in holds of ATCs. Helicopter evacuation, called for within minutes of wounding, meant seriously injured men reached surgical facilities at field hospitals within the critical golden hour. The survival rate for wounded personnel who reached medical care alive exceeded 95%, testament to both speed of evacuation and quality of treatment. When the Tet Offensive exploded across South Vietnam on January 30th, 1968, Vietcong and North Vietnamese Army launched coordinated attacks on cities, towns, and military installations throughout the country. The Mekong Delta did not escape the onslaught. Vietcong main force units emerged from sanctuaries to attack provincial capitals and district towns, including riverside cities like My Tho, Can Tho, and Vie Thanh. But in the Delta, river forces were ready. The mobile Riverine force, positioned at its base on the My Tho River, received alert orders within hours of first attacks. By dawn on January 31st, the brigade was embarked and moving toward My Tho, where Viet Cong forces had penetrated city outskirts. The Monitors led the way, their heavy weapons suppressing enemy positions along riverbanks as ATCs delivered infantry companies directly into the city's contested areas. Unlike ground-based relief forces that had to fight through ambushes and roadblocks, the Riverine force arrived on schedule and in strength. The battle for My Tho became a showcase of Riverine capability. Monitors provided direct fire support from the river, their 40mm cannons smashing through walls to destroy enemy positions inside buildings. PBRs patrolled smaller canals around the city, cutting off Viet Cong escape routes and interdicting resupply attempts. Infantry, supported by this floating artillery, cleared the city block by block. Within 3 days, My Tho was secured, with over 200 enemy dead counted and numerous prisoners taken. American casualties were light, 12 killed and 40 wounded, thanks to overwhelming firepower available from boats. Throughout the Delta, control Americans had established over waterways prevented the Viet Cong from massing forces or sustaining operations as they had intended. The Tet Offensive, though a strategic shock nationwide, was catastrophic for Viet Cong forces in the Mekong Delta. Forced into open combat against superior American firepower and mobility, Viet Cong units suffered losses from which they never fully recovered. Estimates suggest Vietcong main force units in the Delta lost between 40 and 50% of their strength during Tet and its immediate aftermath. The effectiveness of American riverine warfare was not lost on those who fought against it. After the war, when North Vietnamese and Viet Cong commanders published memoirs and gave interviews, their assessments of American river forces were remarkably candid. General Tran Van Tra, who commanded communist forces in the Southern Theater, acknowledged in his memoirs that American control of waterways had severely constrained Viet Cong operations and forced reliance on more dangerous and less efficient overland supply routes. A captured Viet Cong document from 1968, a training manual for cadres, included a section on countering American river patrols. The document described PBRs as highly dangerous opponents whose speed and firepower made ambushes costly and often unsuccessful. It recommended avoiding engagement unless absolutely necessary, and suggested that only heavy weapons like recoilless rifles and RPGs had any chance of success against armored boats. This represented a fundamental shift. The Viet Cong, who had dominated the rivers for years, now sought to avoid combat on those same waters. Soviet military analysts, studying the Vietnam War as a laboratory for understanding American capabilities, devoted considerable attention to riverine operations. A Soviet naval publication from 1969 analyzed the mobile riverine force as an example of successful integration of joint operations in difficult terrain. The article, while critical of American strategic objectives, praised tactical execution and noted that Soviet and Allied forces should study American riverine doctrine for future contingencies. The Vietnam War ended in 1975 with the fall of Saigon. The political and strategic outcome is well documented. But the tactical and operational legacy of the Riverine War tells a different story, one of overwhelming American success in a domain where the enemy had previously reigned supreme. From 1966 through 1970, American riverine forces conducted tens of thousands of patrols, interdicted countless supply movements, killed or captured thousands of enemy fighters, and systematically dismantled Viet Cong control over the waterways of the Mekong Delta. The PBRs, monitors, and other specialized craft proved that technological superiority, properly applied, could dominate even in terrain seemingly designed for guerrilla warfare. The sailors who crewed these boats and the soldiers who fought alongside them performed with courage and professionalism that honored their service. They took a form of warfare, riverine combat, that had existed for centuries and revolutionized it, creating doctrine and tactics studied by military forces worldwide. They faced an enemy skilled in guerrilla warfare, supplied by a superpower rival operating in terrain that seemed to favor defense and concealment. And they prevailed, turning rivers that had been enemy highways into American-controlled battlegrounds, where technology, logistics, and warrior spirit combined to achieve dominance that the enemy, despite Soviet support and decades of experience, could never overcome.